to Toby and Mike for inviting me along to do this. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a public speaker, so this is my first online Zoom talk, so forgive me if it all goes horribly wrong and I ramble. I've put the Latin names of everything on the slides because my pronunciation is lousy and I don't necessarily know them all, but I've looked them all up for you. So when this is being recorded, so you can go back and have a look if there's anything you need to look at later on. This is actually me on the shore in Lee, so at least it's a slide of me in Devon, but I spend most of my time rummaging around on the shore in Cornwall, where I've holidayed since I was about 18 months old. So I've had quite a long time rummaging around down there. But I suppose I didn't really start to look at the rock pools until about 2016, when a couple of significant things happened. And these guys turned up in the newspaper. I don't know whether you remember it, back in sort of March 2016, gentleman down, I think somewhere on the South Cornish coast, found one of these little, what's now known as a St. Piran's crab, after a public vote, giving it a name. They'd been around in Cornwall in the sort of 50s and 60s and then disappeared about the same time as the Torrey Canyon disaster in sort of mid-60s. There's some debate as whether that was actually what caused their disappearance, but they're now back, and actually they're back all over the place down in the southwest. But this was sort of something that caught my eye, so went on holiday down in Trevone that summer. Thought I'd see if I could find any on the north coast. And lo and behold, on the rocky beach in Trevone, I found these two. So these were the very first two recorded on the north coast of Cornwall. That holiday, I also took my youngest, who's somewhere on there, on a Cornwall Wildlife Trust extreme rock pooling event, which sounded very glamorous, but involved us rummaging around in caves. And so the chap who took us, a guy called Matt Slater, who some of you may know, he's the Wildlife Trust's own senior marine conservation officer. And he's very, very enthusiastic about marine life, and met him, and one thing led to another. And I started rummaging about on the shore. I'd already dropped a camera in the water and a phone in the water, and so got a TG4. And this was one of the first photographs I took with my TG4. I was rummaging around in the rock pool, swishing around in some sargassum, actually a useful reference back to the next talk. And this little fluff floated out. So I stuck it in a tray and took a photograph of it. And I've got a little video here of it. It's probably about the size of like many things you find in rock pools, it was about the size of my thumbnail. But it wafted along. No idea what it is. Never heard of a sea slug before. Never heard of a nudibranch. Didn't think too much about it till I got home and had a look on the internet. I thought, oh, well, I should record this. These things are important. Stuck it on the online recording for Kerno and Scilly ERCCIS system, and nobody came back to tell me. I think I recorded as a sea hare, which I also hadn't seen one of. Nobody came back to tell me anything different. And rolled forward a few years, and Matt needed some help with their ERCCIS records because of obviously they have a lot to do in the office, and nobody had got round to doing any of the verification for the intertidal stuff. So he said, well, you now know quite a bit of intertidal stuff. Could you start doing it? And I found this record back from 2017, and then knew roughly where to look. So if you find things and you don't know what they are, photograph them. And the internet, and Facebook for one, is the most incredible place for groups of very keen specialists. You can stick your photograph there. There's the Northeast Atlantic Nudibranch group, which my children find hysterical that I am a member of, along with many other groups. Put these photos up, and a chap actually from Norway got in touch and said, yes, this is the Genolos hyalinus. Then rarely recorded, and that's probably because they're very small and you don't see many of them. I'm sure there are more out there. And great, got not many UK records. Here's another one. So I kept looking, and This one shows you just in the top corner here, this is Acanthodoris pilosa. This one always reminds me of a fruit pastel, for those that remember fruit pastel sweets. They come in a variety of colours, like lots of the nudibranchs. You can't really go on the colour necessarily, but they're also very well hidden. This is my fingertip, and that is this little one at the bottom, but that's it, just sitting on the turf under the rock. Sometimes you can see them more clearly, so they're out there. So yeah, and that's its gills. That's nudibranchs are naked gills, for those that don't know. This is a picture of its gills, and they just sort of sit on the back, but they can retract them, so you can't always see them. So as well as getting involved with walks, Matt said, you should come down and join in with Shoresearch. And I know in Devon, you guys do walkover surveys. But one of the things that the Cornwall Wildlife Trust have been doing since 2012 is in 5 of the protected marine areas they have done transect surveys every year. This will be the 12th year they've been doing it. So they're building up quite a big bank of data that they hope to get one of the students to go through and see if they can actually find any proper trends beginning to take place. But quick run through, put a tape out down the shore from high shore to low shore. You can just about see it in this picture. This is down at Hannaford, and we run down that gully. It's from a fixed point on the shore, so you can pretty much replicate it year on year. And then we take a random number generator and sort out, so we can take tend to try and do 5 quadrats in each zone, so the high shore, mid shore and low shore. It sort of depends on how many volunteers we've got, because it can take quite a bit of time, and you're obviously doing it against the tide. But we record within that sort of 50 centimetre square box, we record everything we can see. We've got some fascinating things turn up. But my first Shoresearch week, most exciting thing I found was this middle zone. These stalk jellyfish. It's often one of the things people say, oh, please show me a stalk jellyfish. They're very small. They're actually quite easy to find when you know what you're looking for. They tend to stick out. They're often bright red. You often find them in around the red filamentous weeds, in mid-shore pools, and there are several species. But this one, I love the Halicalistus radiatus, does tend to come in a variety of colours. And you're back again to don't rely on colour for identifying things. But I find that they're one of the most beautiful creatures in the sea, and the little pom-poms on the end of their arms are their feeding arms, and they take little bits, particles out of deliciousness to them out of the passing waters. You often find them in flowing water if you're looking for in a gully somewhere where the water will move past them, and they collect things on the end, their sticky tentacles, and bring them into the middle to their mouths. So that's one thing to look out for. As I said, they're quite easy to find. But this one in the middle ended up on television because we had Autumn Watch filming with us for that survey. So the middle one was on telly in 2019. As we move on, when you're on the shore and you turn over a rock, sometimes you just have to sort of have something unusual catch your eye. And this little bit here, which I'll show you the video of, was just fluff. Really couldn't see. You could almost, anyone who's taken pictures with a TG and a rock pool can see. Often you can't even see the back of the camera to see what you've got. But I thought this is just interesting looking fluff. Could have just been a piece of, I don't know, fabric that was stuck there. But when I got home and looked on the computer, you can see this sort of stacks. And again, no idea what it was. Stuck it up on Facebook in a group. I think it's North Atlantic Nidria. And someone came back, one of the scientists in this, and said, this is fascinating. This is part of the moon jellyfish cycle. And they start off as jellyfish. I've actually got this picture covered up by all your faces, but I hope you can see it's a circle that goes around. You start with a jellyfish, end up with polyps who settle, and then they do this strobilation and they sort of form a stack, and then they peel off the top back out into the water and grow into a jellyfish. So that was, well, I found it fascinating. Just as I said, just some white fluff under a rock. And it turned out to be something that even the scientists said, you know, we don't see this very often. You definitely don't see it in the wild very often. They try and create it sometimes in laboratory conditions, grow them in tanks. But so that was one of my highlights from that year. I'm going to show you the video again, and then hopefully it'll move on to this time of year. You get lots of fish eggs under the rocks. And again, you're back to tiny things. That's the end of my fingertip. And this little chap here is just here, the who specializes, as most sea slugs do. They tend to be very specific about their food type. And this one likes eating rock goby eggs. There's some debate whether it's just rock gobies or whether it's black goby eggs as well, but this one was in rock goby eggs. They have this sort of spots on the serrata, so actually when they're in among the eggs, they look quite like eggs. It's again, but if you ever see fish eggs, especially at this time of year, you can see them. Have a really, really good look, because you may find one of these chaps in there. I said nudibranchs tend to take on the color of what they eat. So these are a pair of white ruffed sea slugs, showing their white ruffs very nicely. This one's recently had a meal. They like daisy anemones, among other anemones they like to eat. And this one looks as though it might be a bit hungry. I might want to go off and have a look for something. But again, these same nudibranch, easy-ish to spot with their white ruffs. But these other two are also the same species of nudibranch. But as we'll talk a little bit later, the fact that with DNA testing now, they're beginning to divide up. So Ampharina is now a vast array of different Ampharina. So there's a chance actually when you find one, and again, these are smaller than your thumbnail, you might never actually get to find out exactly which one it is. There's a link at the end to a scientific paper where there's a whole array of these Ampharina. They're all very beautiful, but their differences are minute. But again, back to looking closer. This guy was under a rock. The last rock I turned over on the beach on the day I was actually down on holiday with the family, and they're getting quite used to the fact that I disappear for 2 hours before and after low tide. But tide had turned, I was on my way back, and it's the usual last rock scenario. I turned it over, and this little thing was here. Now, it looked, before I got it on a big screen, just in the rock pool, look a bit like a lamellaria, which has now just changed its name to Mersenia perspicua. But they're a little mollusk, and they look basically very like this. And actually, even that little blob there made me think the lamellaria have a little siphon at the front. But got home a week later, looking through photographs, and thought this one's got rhinophores, which are these little organs on the front here. These are very, very short for rhinophores. Often they're much longer in sea slugs, but these are rhinophores. So back to sending photographs off to an assortment of people I knew and sticking them back on the Facebook Northeast Atlantic Nudibranch group. And my phone went a bit berserk. All my notifications went berserk, and I had a couple of very knowledgeable people get back to me and say, no, this one's not been seen in the UK before. This one has come across sort of round from the coasts of Africa up through the coast of Portugal, where a few have been seen, and now it turned up in Trebone on the north coast of Cornwall. I've never seen another one. I know exactly where I found it. I've been back several times since, but no, this was the one and only. But it got recorded, and it's there, and it was in time to go into Bernard Picton's fabulous latest nudibranch book. So it has its own little moment of fame. This is a description of it, because there really wasn't much of a description of it out there. Again, this is being recorded, so it's just there for you to read later on if you want to, but it was good. I really couldn't find very much out about it at all before everybody had a good dig around and went back through some, as I said, records from other places. You probably gathered now, I quite like looking for nudibranchs and looking for little things, and they tend to stick in your mind. Easiest way of finding them is to look for their spawn, their eggs. So down here in the bottom right-hand corner, these are some dotto eggs on this piece of seaweed, and that's the sea slug itself, but they are really tiny. This guy here, this Eubrachus, 7 millimeters. And luckily it was on a piece of slate, so I could actually see it, and this mate was around the corner as well. So they were easy to see. But the this one was down at Trefusis Point and was quite high up the shore, just on the bottom of a piece of seaweed. And again, you just need to get your eye into looking for different texture, almost, until you get a camera on it and zoom in and can actually see what you've got. So I have lots and lots and lots of pictures of bits of fluff and random detritus on the shore, but sometimes you just strike it lucky. I'm fine. And this is my nemesis. This one I didn't find, and you can tell that's the arm of a brittle star. So that shows you just this one is really quite tiny, but very pink. And again, I know where they're found, but I've never found one myself. So that's one I've got to look out for myself. This one got us into trouble because we were supposed to be doing a seaweed survey, but nobody had seen one of these Acania elegans before. And it's gorgeous. And this is quite big. This is a couple of centimeters long. So that caused a lot of distraction when we were supposed to be doing, there's a seaweed festival coming up down in Marazion, and we were doing the initial seaweed survey at Stackhouse Cove for that, and got into trouble because we all got distracted by a sea slug. Fabrinus branchialis, you want, again, look on other sea slugs' eggs, because that's what that eats. So if you see sea slug eggs, not only look for the slugs that have laid the eggs, but other slugs eating the eggs that slug has just laid, because they're in there. This is just one of my favorites, the Facilina and the Unicornis. Again, if you look in the documentation, they say there aren't very many records, but in the southwest, I seem to find them quite regularly. So they're definitely around, and I think probably just under-recorded, because we don't get to see there's not that many of us running around poking under rocks. So do more running around and rummaging and poking under rocks. There's lots there, we just need to record it. Last set of nudibranchs, I promise. Just again, another example. This one up here, the Polycera norvegica, used to, when I first started sort of out in 2019, there were Polycera, or everyone called them quadrilineata. It was all quadrilineata, and then they've got divided up. Lots of studies have been done on them, DNA tested, and that's their egg mass. And there are 6 in this photograph, but they go from very tiny to a little bit bigger. Pruvatfolia, this one's only turned up in the UK in about 2014, but they were seen eating, there was a large influx of crystal jellyfish last year in the southwest, and somebody got a photograph of one of these eating one of them. So maybe, again, they tend to follow their foodstuffs around. So I know at the moment we've got a lot of the Velella, the by the wind sailors have been blown in. And that's also, you find violet sea snails with them. So again, creatures tend to follow their food around. This is a fave. Again, he was another, I say it was another last rock of the day, turning over on Hannaford Beach, and I had to drag all the Shoresearch crew back down because they'd all given up and gone back to have their lunches. But that was the first one, the first Paleonatus that I found, and they have a very sort of spiky, they're almost crenellated across the top like as a castle. So that's these guys. Girana, soft and velvety. Find those quite commonly on the shore, along with the Acania nodosa, which are often in groups, but again, very pale. Just have to look close. These are the more common ones you'll find. The orange club sea slug are getting bigger. Earlier through the year, they were very, very tiny, but these can come up to a couple of centimeters and are very bright and cheery to look at. This monster, this is a Doris pseudoarchus, sea lemon, and this guy was a couple of inches. It was big, it's chunkiest one I have ever found, and we found this quite on a low tide in Godrevy, right out beyond one of the large sort of rock stacks of Godrevy. But again, don't go by colour. This is a pair of them. Some are more yellow, and they can be mixed up with Idiotodoris planata, which is this one, who has acid glands on its back. The white patches on its back are its defence against predators. So the definitive way of deciding whether you've got a sea lemon or a Diotodorus is to turn them over and have a look at the brown spots that this Diotodorus has on its mantle, but don't do it unless you've got gloves. I mean, it's unlikely to hurt you, but it'll definitely start giving off acid and objecting when you turn it over. So unless you desperately need to know and can't decide what it is, it's probably best just to leave them be. And these ones are everybody's favourites, the solar-powered sea slugs. But again, just a little warning, don't always go by colour. I know they go green, they eat codium seaweeds. They're often found on codiums, and they use the chloroplasts and they store them and then photosynthesize them and get some energy from the sun from them. Sorry, we'll go back one. But actually, they're not always green. This little one, again, if you know the sargassum, the wire weed, that gives you some idea of the scale of this little fella. But it was brown, right at the top of the shore, so not deep, not a long way out. And again, just caught my eye. But brown, they come in brown as well as green. But it's not all about sea slugs. These are the most ineptly named shore creature in my name. These are grey chitons. They're not all grey. I have no idea. I'm sure some science has been done as to why they are these most amazing colours on their plates. They're chain mail, coated mail is another name for them. They have this sort of armour plated, and they can curl up. They do, if you get them off the rock. They're rather like a limpet. They have a radula, a sort of sharp-toothed mouth, and they graze on macroalgae on the rocks. But most of the time you'll find them on the shore. If you turn a rock over, they'll be tucked down. I have occasionally seen them move, but the identification for the grey sea slug is clearly not sea slug. The grey chiton is on these guys, their mantle. And this one shows it very clearly. They have a dark spot. The Lepidophyta, the cinerea, has a dark spot on its mantle in this sort of striped pattern. But it's not all, again, like many creatures, it's not always clear. But they're just gorgeous. I could photograph chitons for hours and hours and hours. And I don't think you ever see one that's the same as the next. And when you start out, a chiton's a chiton, but it's not. These are some of their cousins. I think there are 11 chiton species you can find in the UK. Most of them you find at depths you won't find on the shore. So if you're diving, any of you dive or snorkel, you might see different ones. The bristle chiton, this Acanthochytona crenata, is smaller, tends to be smaller, and everything starts off small. So you may find a small grey chiton, but the bristle chitons tend to come up smaller than the grey chitons when you find them. And again, I'd found these, thought that was it. I've got 2 chiton species. That's great. That's what comes up. And you look a little bit deeper into it and discover there are even more you can find. This guy was a Dorset one, actually. I was on a field trip a couple of weeks ago with the Porcupine Marine Natural History Society, and this was my first Acanthochytona fascicularis. Again, it's got bristles, so it can be possibly confused to start with, but this one, I don't know if you can sort of tell, the mantle's thicker. Its plates are sort of sunken into it, so it looks a lot squishier than, if we go back one, the bristle chitons tend to look smaller and more bristly to my eyes. Anyway, and the Calochiton septum valvis is bigger. Again, you must be able to find small ones on the shore because they have to grow at some point. But their sort of useful ID feature is they tend to have these four pale corners. They do come in an assortment of colours. They're not quite as colourful as the other 2 species that we've just been looking at, but they do obviously come in different. This one's been bashed on a corner, so it's only got 4 white corners and a dent. But that's chitons. And that there are others. And don't just rely on what you see. Always ask people. This was one I saw, very mysterious to me. Didn't no idea what it was. Again, ask people, find out. And same gentleman who wrote the great description, Ian Smith. If you look him up on Flickr, he has great species accounts of lots of mollusks and what they get up to. Really, really clear ID features for them. And he said, yeah, these are egg masses and they've been laid in a sea squirt. So when the eggs hatch, they'll eat the sea squirt, which is what they again were what was a Lamellaria and Marcenia perspicua, which is this little mollusk. And you can see, hopefully, this one, why I thought the Corumbo testudinaria, the little first UK sighting slug we had earlier, looks a bit like this. He look more like this one. Again, they all have different colors. They tend to color themselves. How they do it, I don't know, but they color to match the background of the turf. These guys eat bryozoans, and you can see his little siphon there. And they actually have an internal shell, which you can just about see in this one in there. And that again was at the seaweed survey, where I got a little bit distracted, but I promise I don't get distracted all the time. I get on with what I'm supposed to be doing. This year, I got to January and I'd not been on the shore since November, and saw Toby had put up on the shores of South Devon that they were doing a survey. And I came to the conclusion that it was only a 4-hour drive from Harpenden down to Goodrington, so I could do a day trip. So on January the 13th, on a particularly grey and cold day, I threw on every layer I could find and came down, met up with Toby and possibly some of the people who are out there listening. It was nice to meet you all. And a new shore, never explored down in that part of Devon. And a new shore and some new species. And it's not every time I go on the shore, even familiar shores, do I see something I've never seen before. But very often you find something you've just never seen, not noticed, not been fortunate enough to see. In this case, it was a pullet carpet shell who was here with his little valves open, was right down the bottom of a crevice. But I managed to get a torch in there and get a picture, and a little hermit crab in this netted dog whelk shell who was sitting next to him. And beautiful sea anemone, not a greatest of photographs. Again, it was almost pitch dark in there, and lots of silt around. But this one it was easy to identify because it's one of the only ones that has this very, very distinctive straight lines, dark lines in its tentacles. And I had a picture of the column, which I haven't got much in the way of sea anemones on here, but if you're ever having to identify a sea anemone, if you can get a picture of its column, it's really, really useful. And occasionally that means poking them, which I was not particularly happy to do to start with, but actually lots of things bump past them under the water and they soon come back out again. But if you give them a poke, you can often get at least a picture of the top of their column, which will help you when you're identifying them. One of the very, very best things about doing what I've been doing is the people I've met. I have met wonderful people who share their knowledge and enthusiasm, and we meet up. I meet up. This is Heather, who I think has done a couple of talks for you guys. She is the absolutely queen of nudibranchs. She'll find a nudibranch on any shore, although I was very, very reassured when she and I went and spent hours searching a beach and didn't find a single nudibranch. And I thought, well, if Heather can't find one here, then it's all right to go out sometimes and not find what you're looking for. Actually, sometimes it's better to go out without actually setting out to find something in particular, because then you aren't disappointed. You always find something. That's Matt Slater, who lots of you know, who is the world's most enthusiastic rock pooler, and it's entirely his fault I have ended up getting as involved as I have. Thank you, Toby. This was why I wanted your photograph to put you in here, because you and Mike have given me the opportunity to speak to you guys today, which is, yeah, out of my comfort zone completely. But it's good. It's good to do things you're not used to. I'm flicking over notes here because I've got another page. It'll fall down. I know a lot of you here probably are members of a marine group, but if you've turned up as a student or just somebody interested, I was going to say join your local group. Local is a very loose term. As I said, I live in Hertfordshire, so there is no reason why you can't join a marine group anywhere in the country, anywhere you either can get to easily or you just tend to enjoy being in. You can just go and join in, and nobody minds. Everybody I've ever met has been welcoming. Nobody says, "What are you doing? You don't know anything." You learn an awful lot. You can get involved, and it's actually quite meaningful. The data we collect actually ends up going further back up the data chain into the records offices for the national databases, and then they're used to influence policy, to get see trends, used to set up marine protected areas. To data backs up all sorts of things, and new species are discovered, and the movement of species, which again some people will attribute to climate change, others will just have thoughts on whether it's just water warming. I mean, water goes through natural cycles of warming and cooling around our coasts, so there's a lot to be debated and a lot to learn. What do you need to do? Photograph what you see. And again, people say, "Oh, but I haven't got an underwater camera, or I haven't got this." And it's fine. Take a phone snap. Try, if you're photographing things, to take them from several angles, because very often it's not easy to tell exactly what something is just from the one angle. There are lots and lots of different identifying features for some things, especially shells and any of the mollusks. Just take a picture of the aperture, the operculum, the hole where they live, the shape, the size. Make a note of where you find it, whether it's upper shore or lower shore, and record them. In Devon, you use the walkover surveys, so there's the Shoresearch app, but you can go online and find your recording, whatever area you're in will have a local recording method. Again, ask someone. Don't forget to record the usual things, the mussels, various bugs and top shells, seaweeds, everything. It all changes through different seasons. Storms cause different things to be sort of torn off the rocks, and then they come back again. Sometimes they come back in the same place, sometimes somewhere else. And so the recording of common species is important, and it's very often overlooked. And then back to data helps track trends and inform policy. So what you're doing is actually important. This was a little slide I said I'd show you of how some of these species have been divided up. There's all sorts of scientific papers out there. Fascinating to read, even if you only read the sort of introductions and conclusions and sort of miss out all the science. Not being a scientist, some of the science is way over my head, but it's interesting to see what people are doing. Even from when this was first put out, they then changed the name again, so names are always changing. And this is just, again, you can look at it on the recording, but this is a list of Facebook groups for the various species you might find. David Fennick, wonderful gentleman down in Penzance, has an incredibly comprehensive website, A Photo Marine, which if you haven't come across it and you're wanting to find things, you can always start there. He has detailed photographs of all sorts of things. The Conchological Society has a great set of pages. That's where the chiton species, I went to find out about all of them. And the NBN Atlas will show you where records of things have been found. So if you find something and think, "Oh, is this in the right place? Could it be this? Could it be that?" It gives you an idea of either, no, we've never found this species here. Doesn't mean you haven't got it right. Might be the first one found there, or you might need to find someone to tell you something slightly different. And that's it. I probably rattled through a little bit quickly. But most importantly to me, this has gone from being a hobby to something. It's a hobby, but it's important. It actually, the recording of things, as I said, actually makes a difference. It's useful, it's relevant, and is contributing something, which is great. Makes you feel it's worthwhile, and I find it fascinating, as you've probably discovered. I hope you guys do too. Please keep doing it. If you don't do it, try, explore, join in, and please ask questions. Anyone is welcome to get in touch with me. I'm sure Toby and Mike are the same if you need to ask them anything. But thank you for listening. Thank you for inviting me to speak, Toby and Mike.